In the 30 years since Earthbound's release, the rest of the world has been trying to catch up. Today, it is generally accepted as one of the great games, but at the time it was a failure. It befuddles me to read reviews from the 90s that willingly call its graphics bad and its gameplay simplistic because in the decade since, the look and vibe of Earthbound has been so thoroughly imitated by its ever-growing number of disciples that it has been retroactively made to feel, in my hands, almost new. But gamers then just didn't know what to make of it, and it's not hard to see why. Earthbound is invested in evoking unusual emotions in its players. It takes joy in angering, confusing, and beguiling the poor people who donate their time to playing it. But that's not just a prank, rather it is ultimately in service of a profound experience that demands that wide spectrum of emotional reactions to clear out the brush for it to safely land. It is keenly aware, especially for its time, of the multifaceted artistic potential of games, even if consumers were not. Pair all that with a deeply ill-conceived Western marketing campaign and so few North Americans bought copies that today loose cartridges go for $500 and I'll never own a physical copy unless you donate to my Patreon. Of course, we already know that by now it has become well appreciated and remarkably influential, the fingers of its design and personality reaching into countless modern titles that expand and explore similar ideas in fresh, compelling ways. So, understanding Earthbound is the key to understanding so much of what has followed in the decade since. Unfortunately, and thankfully, Earthbound resists being understood. It is so rich in strangeness, so inscrutable in certain places despite its clarity in others, so simultaneously hidden and revealed are its secrets, that finding one answer to it is an impossible task. Here I am, though, throwing my hat into the ring regardless, because talking about Earthbound is just too much fun. It is a story that is as often cheerful as it is melancholy, a story that smoothly shifts its scope between modest and monumental, and a game that, despite the pain, decides to let hope shine through. I'm aware that Earthbound is already among the most written about games ever made, and by proposing my own interpretations today, I am not saying that previous writing was inadequate, nor my analysis definitive, just that I, perhaps self-indulgently, would like to add what I can. The shape of Earthbound's crystal is fine and complex, the sort of prism that with the slightest shift in perspective will produce an entirely new and beautiful pattern on the wall. So here's what I see. Welcome to Reconstructed. Full spoilers ahead for Earthbound, and the 1959 novel The Sirens of Titan. Also, warning for flashing lights and repeating patterns. There is one particularly intense section which I will give another verbal warning for when we get there. While not as extreme, the typical battle animations and backgrounds shown throughout the video may also be difficult for those with photosensitivity. There is an audio-only version of the video up for free on my Patreon page. We begin at night. A crashing sound outside awakens our protagonist. He jumps out of bed, ready to investigate, donning a striped shirt and baseball cap. Navigating up some grassy cliffs and around some cops doing nothing, he discovers that a meteorite has struck the top of the hill and sits there smoldering. A neighbor kid has come to see as well, but a police roadblock sends both of them home before they can get too close. This boy's name is Ness, at least by default. When creating a new file, the player is asked to name all 4 party members before they even have any idea of their role in the story. Ness is the primary protagonist and, typical for the genre, does not speak. However, he is not intended as a one-to-one avatar for the player either. He has some personality traits, but they are left to be inferred from NPC dialogue and combat mechanics rather than shown directly. For example, both his mother and a cop outside say there's no point trying to stop him from exploring as he'll just find a way to do it anyway. Therefore, he is brave and curious, and perhaps not inclined to respect authority. Further information about who he is and how he feels is drip-fed quite slowly throughout the game, and a full picture, while sketched, is never painted. Especially at the start, I wouldn't blame anyone for seeing him as a blank slate. The game also asks for your favorite homemade food, and indeed that will be Ness's favorite food as well. Whatever you list as your favorite thing will be the name of Ness's signature magic attack. By default it will be called Rockin' for some reason, but because I'm incurably sappy, I chose Love. At the same time, if you name Ness after yourself, that will actually cause problems later because, subtly but crucially, the game constructs a separation between Ness and the player. They are two distinct entities within the fiction of Earthbound. You can influence his actions, but even if you both like steak, Ness isn't you. The importance of that distinction, though, does not materialize for quite a while. Later on that same night, Ness is awoken by another commotion, this time a haphazard knocking at the door. The culprit is Pokey Minch, the blonde neighbor boy from earlier. He is distressed because he lost his little brother in the woods and demands Ness help find him. The sound design of his knock succinctly establishes Pokey's character. Only a truly inconsiderate person would knock so loudly, continuously, and arrhythmically. Pokey is not concerned about his brother's safety, just fearful of the punishment he may receive later. Ness agrees to help, and can choose to take his old dog along as well, who is also nameable despite his overall very minor role. Before leaving, Ness's mother delivers an encouraging speech, an indication that this is a point of no return, that when you leave home you will enter a world that is, in part, trying to make you lose. The combat of Earthbound is, in a word, expressive. While built of familiar boxes and numbers, it is not afraid to color outside the lines. The battles, repetitive as they naturally may be, are not divorced from the narrative, but rather a major piece to its puzzle, finding plenty of ways to influence and elaborate on what happens outside of them. The first trick they show off is their ability for detailed characterization. Any doubts about the kind of person Pokey is have evaporated after the first few battles, which make crystal clear that he is a selfish coward. Ness's actions are of course dictated by the player, but Pokey's are picked at random, and all of them, from playing dead to smiling insincerely to using Ness as a shield, have no effect whatsoever. This stands in contrast to the dog, who actually can lightly damage the enemy. If Pokey is so thoroughly useless in combat, why even include these superfluous lines of text? Well, because Earthbound is not subdivided into gameplay and story, it is one whole experience. Pokey is written to be an odious character, acting like he's better than everyone else while annoying every soul in earshot. By injecting that personality into the battles, it is not just shown to the player, but also felt by them. So Pokey is awful in a lot of ways, but he's also a child, so you can't fully hold that against him. Yet. At the top of the hill, Ness finds Pokey's brother Picky unharmed. As they start to leave, a golden pillar of light emerges from the meteorite. Inside is an insect from the future. His name is Buzz, and he tells Ness that 10 years from now, Giygas, the universal cosmic destroyer, will send all to the horror of eternal darkness. Okay. However, an ancient prophecy apparently identified Ness as uniquely capable of stopping this from occurring. That's a lot of faith to put in a boy who has, so far, only defeated 2 snakes and a crow. The stakes of the plot suddenly could not be higher. Either Ness succeeds, or life ends. Soon after, the party encounters a Starman, a silvery henchman of Giygas who traveled from the future to kill Buzz. Through the grammar of the combat system, we learn that Buzz isn't just a bug, but is also an incredibly powerful fighter, utilizing advanced abilities to single-handedly protect the children and win the fight. He was some sort of major figure in the resistance to Giygas. The Starman refers to him having been a hero. So the challenge facing Ness is mighty, but at least in Buzz he has a strong ally and teacher. But then you walk into Pokey's house and Buzz is unceremoniously killed by Pokey's mother, who mistakes him for a dung beetle. Before passing on, Buzz manages to impart the method by which Ness will obtain the power to defeat Giygas, the map of Earthbound's progression. He must visit 8 specific locations across the world, collectively called Your Sanctuary. Each of them contains a piece of a melody, completion of which will allow Ness to unite his power with the earth, multiplying his strength. Buzz then blinks out of existence. The rapid introduction and death of Buzz is intended to be darkly funny. As a character, Ness comes from a place of relative simplicity and innocence. The introduction to the game's science fiction / cosmic horror elements had to come from someone else. However, the game also wants Ness and his future friends to be mostly on their own, forced to confront the problems and unravel the mysteries with their own willpower and ingenuity. BuzzBuzz provides enough information to kickstart the adventure, but has to leave before he becomes too helpful. So you get this miniature tragic character arc that generates intrigue and shows that in this story life is fragile, all with a humorous tone. And nothing more about BuzzBuzz is ever revealed. Where he came from, why he's an insect, why he was at one point a hero, we never get to know. Because Earthbound is not a game about getting all the answers, it's a game about struggling to do what you must through an often cruel and always bewildering world that will never fully explain itself. With a goal and responsibility now in his mind, Ness goes out the front door, the sun comes up, and you are on your way. The first Your Sanctuary spot is somewhere near Ness's hometown of Onett. Onett is quaint. It is the typical image of small-town America. It has wide streets, red stop signs, blue mailboxes, and cars with no regard for pedestrian safety. The country containing Onett and the next few cities is called Eagleland. Far from the high fantasy settings typical of its genre, Earthbound begins in an obvious parody of the good old United States. Its only restaurant is a burger joint. The game is simply littered with Americana, down to the white picket fences and overfunded police force. While I think the aesthetic was adopted largely for the sake of distinctiveness and to reflect the game director's major influences more than it was intended to make some statement about America, it still ends up doing that at least a little bit. The towns in Earthbound aren't just wallpaper, but are pretty thoroughly interactable. The first thing the player might have Ness do is walk into that burger place with $20 to his name and buy a burger for $14. This keeps happening to me in real life, tremendous prescience there for the state of the US dollar in 2025. At this stage in the game, the burger is a fairly useful healing item, but it's also far from the only way to recover health. The burger shop is not essential to visit, but does have somewhat of a useful function. That is, in general, how these places are all designed, everything being a mixture of flavor and utility rather than one or the other. To identify the tasks required for progress, the player will need to genuinely explore Onett and places like it, speaking to a wide range of NPCs who are more likely to make a joke or be outright rude than to tell you where to go. The people who seem to be useless aren't exactly so, serving a purpose in building out the essential voice of the game. Earthbound slathers its locations and dialogue with personality, and the player, like it or not, has no choice but to soak it in. Soon Ness discovers his first true barrier to progress: bureaucracy. The only pathway to the sanctuary spot is behind a locked door, and only the mayor of Onett has the key. However, the mayor refuses to see you because he is supposedly too busy dealing with the local street gang. So Ness must forge his way through a few too many battles with the questionably uniformed gang to meet their leader, Frank. Frank strikes a weird pose and also has a tank for some reason. He's the sort of early game boss that is just hard enough to force the player to learn things like when to heal and when to attack, and no harder. After Ness's victory, the mayor praises him and rewards him with the key. You would think this is a typically simple storyline. Main character defeats criminal, saves town, receives prize. Not so fast, because when Ness actually uses the key, he gets arrested. Well, not exactly arrested, but he has to report to the police station before leaving town, where the captain brings him into a room where 5 adult cops try to beat him up. This is unusual. What other Nintendo game looks at the audience and clearly states, "Hey kids, don't trust the cops"? And there's no point later in the game where the cops are portrayed as good guys. This is how Earthbound sees the police. Like, this line from Pokey demonstrates the writers are aware cop is considered by some a rude term, yet that is still the word the game's UI refers to them by. And this is what I mean by the game sometimes functioning as a criticism of America, because what is more American than a violent, dysfunctional police force? That reality is presented as a straightforward truth of the setting. Moreover, it's not exactly that Earthbound is specifically anti-police, but that it is distrustful of society's power structures in general. The mayor is clearly self-centered, and his methods for dealing with a minor threat were totally ineffectual. If you talk to him later, there is no apology for Ness's harassment at the hands of the police department, just urging to help him win re-election. If you talk to Frank later though, he fully heals you, no questions asked. Across the Onett section of the game, a violent criminal gang and the local government are treated as, essentially, the same sort of thing. and it's the gang leader that is more gracious in defeat, more savable than the police captain. Earthbound's political alliance is, beyond any doubt, not with the status quo. Consistently across the story, the current political system proves to be deeply exploitable, and consistently it is outsiders to that system that actually get stuff done. There is one major character who is sort of an exception to this, but believe me, I will have plenty to say about him much later in the video. This whole Onett sequence is very grounded, very suburban in its setting and imagery. For a quest to save the planet from alien annihilation, this is a modest first chapter. From the very start, any player will be expecting UFO warfare, the opening screen fading from a crimson-yellow static into a scene of flying saucers destroying a town with "The War Against Giygas" written boldly and redly across the top. Given this and BuzzBuzz's exposition, the story's destination is apparent, yet so much of the player's time along the journey is spent in department stores and city halls. It is exactly this careful juxtaposition of the modern and mundane with the surreal and extraterrestrial that lends Earthbound its unique aesthetic character. By situating the player in areas reminiscent of boring daily life, there sprouts a promise that whatever foreign strangenesses lie in wait, this story will be relevant to your life on this Earth. Also present is an earthly environmental theme alongside everything else, most visible in the Your Sanctuary concept. Each location is a sort of charismatic natural oasis, separate from the chaos and conflict they lay just outside of. The sort of place that should be protected. To gain access, a special guardian boss must be defeated. These bosses have some memorable designs, but are represented by identical sparkles in the overworld and recite the exact same script before battle, so they don't provide as much depth as they maybe could have. When finally reaching the sanctuary itself, Ness becomes fully healed by a soft, white pulse of light, and he is reminded of a memory from his early childhood. Another fraction of the melody is absorbed, and you are free to relax here for as long as you like. The specific shapes of the Your Sanctuary spots are obtuse, and if they are intentionally symbolic, it is too opaque for me to grasp. Like, what does it mean that the first one is a giant footprint? I really couldn't tell you. What they represent broadly, though, is quite audible. As stated earlier, these places will bestow upon Ness unity with the Earth. The Sound Stone, an item with captivating visuals that allows the player to track how many sanctuaries they've found, always has a spinning blue marble in the center. The logo for the Mother series as a whole is the Earth, so whatever is good in this game is connected to the natural environment. However, we must not forget that the actual gameplay of Earthbound is dominated time-wise by turn-based combat. The enemies, while supernatural sometimes, are very often simple wild animals or disgruntled people. On the face of it, that seems a tad incompatible with environmentalist and pro-social messaging, and while there may be something to that, the game is cognizant of that dissonance as it writes the battles. The animals don't die when you beat them, they become tame. The people aren't injured, they simply go back to normal. As clarified by BuzzBuzz, your opponents are all being affected by Giygas' far-reaching sinister psychic powers. The world of Earthbound is not filled with innately malicious beasts or incorrigible knaves, but rather benign creatures suffering under the influence of a cruel outside force. This goes for both the gang members and the policemen in Onett as well. Neither would have been quite so combative if it weren't for Giygas, even if they were the townsfolk most susceptible to violent impulses. While Giygas exists, though, the world will remain remarkably dangerous, something reinforced constantly by the battles awaiting Ness around every corner. With the first sanctuary melody recorded and the police captain dispatched, the player is free to progress to the next town, but before we leave Onett, I want to fully establish what we know about the two most significant characters we've met, Ness and Pokey. Pokey is a nasty little asshole, we know that, but his parents are nasty assholes too. Pokey was justified in fearing his father's punishment because Aloysius Minch is physically abusive to both his sons. The couple are shockingly pompous and callous, openly discussing their simmering hatred for Ness's family. Mrs. Minch kills an interdimensional hero without a second thought. Clearly Pokey is the way he is in part because these are the people who raised him. But it's not all nurture here either, because Picky seems to be a normal, good-natured kid. On the way back from the meteorite, he actually contributed damage in battle while Pokey cowered and lied. So while Pokey's upbringing was unfortunate and certainly didn't help, there is something deeper wrong with him that contributes to Earthbound's ultimate beliefs about humanity. He will continue to appear throughout the game. Ness, on the other hand, comes from a loving home. His family is, though, worse off financially than the Minch's. Their house is noticeably smaller and less fancily decorated. Mr. Minch apparently lent Ness's father a lot of money and isn't afraid to lord over them about it. Ness's father, in fact, is constantly at work and never home. He speaks very warmly to his family over the phone, so maybe overworking himself is not a choice but a financial necessity. Ness's little sister even picks up a part-time job, although that may simply be her precocious nature. I can't tell for sure if they're supposed to be poor or just flat average middle class. Similar to what people have noted about The Simpsons from the same era, a family could be depicted as vaguely struggling while still owning a 2,000 square foot home, and that didn't used to be a contradiction. Regardless, while Ness is framed as a very special person by the narrative, he does not come from an inherently special place. He is just a normal boy who happens to have a remarkable destiny. But how is Ness feeling about all this? It's a lot of weight to carry all of a sudden, right? Is he scared? Or nervous? Excited? Determined? Did Buzz's death make him sad? No one can say. Ness's silence stands out, an intentional shroud drawn around the main character that obscures whatever it is he may or may not be saying or thinking. However, here and there we do get some hand-picked clues. Ness is about to travel far from home, and we do know, to some extent, how that makes him feel. After a certain level, every battle has a small chance of inflicting Ness with a unique status effect: homesickness. This will cause him to pretty frequently waste turns reminiscing about home, making every battle significantly riskier. Homesickness can only be cured by finding a telephone and calling Ness's mom, and the game can only be saved by calling Ness's dad, who, despite his absence, speaks to Ness in a kind and encouraging manner. Ness is embarking alone on a long and scary journey, and much of his strength comes from his memories of Onett and the people there that he loves. As it turns out, though, he won't be alone for long. Ness already knows where to go next because it came to him in a dream. Someone named Paula is communicating with him while he sleeps, and she needs his help. Part of what makes the playable characters in Earthbound so special in-universe is their potent psychic powers, referred to as PSI. The secondary battle stat, PP, stands for Psychic Points and is their resource pool for actions like healing, inflicting status effects, and doing damage beyond basic physical attacks. This ability to affect the world with just their minds, to speak across large distances, is framed as both rare and indispensable. PSI is the key to so much of what the party does across the game. To communicate with someone on a level deeper than simple speech is vital. The next town is called Tucson, and it is a step larger and busier than Onett. It has stores with multiple floors, a big park with a community market, a trendy theater, and a preschool. Paula's parents run this preschool and she lives on the top floor. Or she did before she was recently kidnapped. You'd almost call Paula's abduction the talk of the town with how many NPCs refer to it, but it seems that the last two people to notice she's gone are her mom and dad. They aren't portrayed as abusive or even neglectful, just absent-minded and too involved in their work with the school children to pay much attention to their daughter who has an independent streak anyway. That is, in general, how adults are in Earthbound. Not consistently useful. They are usually too caught up in their daydreams and worries, their preconceptions and prejudices, to really notice what is happening today. The main characters are 12 to 13, the sort of age where the innate magic of childhood still lingers, but also the shape of the real world with all its thorns is coming into focus. It's a liminal age where sometimes you can see things more sharply than folks whose eyes have grown bleary from decades of trudging through the mud. According to Earthbound, it will have to be the youth who saves the world. Many Tucson residents suspect the notorious burglar Everdread of taking Paula. He wears a horrible bowler hat, but is not the real culprit. Everdread does tell you, though, that she was taken to a hideout in a valley to the east. On the other side of peaceful Rest Valley, which, by the way, isn't, lies Happy Happy Village, a settlement under the complete control of a fanatical religious cult. The Happy Happyists have painted everything blue, from the houses to their clothes to the cow. They also, you may have noticed, bear a striking resemblance to the Ku Klux Klan. This was more blatant in the original Japanese version, but even in the Western release the visual inspiration is hard to ignore. Earthbound was, in my view, not prepared for the baggage of the imagery they chose for this group. The decision-making was likely as simple as that if you're writing a homegrown American cult, the strongest pictures that come to mind are pointy hoods, eye holes, and an obsession with one particular color. The issue is that the happyists are too silly. Substituting white supremacy for blue supremacy doesn't really land as a joke to me, not when the real KKK have such a ghastly history in the recent past and, while fringe, remain an extant threat today. Moreover, the Klan was never just a disconnected organization, but emblematic of the deep American tradition of virulent racism that pervades far beyond the small circle of official members. Sorry to bring the tone down, but this is the sort of conversation a story needs to be ready for when it draws such a direct comparison between its own fiction and the goddamn KKK. Earthbound doesn't reflect the requisite gravity. Another side of the argument is that by depicting them as mostly unserious and easily defeated, the game could be saying that white supremacy too is weak and fragile. There is something to that, and they aren't entirely unthreatening either. They kidnapped Paula and, depending on who you ask, plan to make her a high priestess or even a human sacrifice. When you refuse to join, the leader's official position is to strike you with lightning. Why it still feels like a misstep to me is how out of thin air the group was founded and how completely the ideology is eradicated, all its former adherents fully and instantly forgiven. Happyism was a bizarre aberration to Egoland, rather than an inevitable result of broader societal conditions like its inspiration was and is to the good old United States. That's why I think they should have rethought the design. It's far from a mortal sin, just the sort of element I would feel uncomfortable glossing over. But then, how did happyism pop into existence anyway? Well, first let's go back to something that happened near the beginning of the game that I haven't yet mentioned. In the house closest to where the meteorite landed lives a man named Liar X Adjurate, who purports to be a treasure hunter while living in squalor. He likes to brag about his manliness and how much garlic he eats or something, and seems to want to befriend Ness. Ness seems to dislike him. However, deep underground, Adjurate has found something remarkable. A giant golden statue of a man with horns. He is excited to show off his discovery to Ness, but then quickly shoos him away lest he start to have greedy thoughts. After Ness later wriggles his way through the sea of blue hoods to reach the church's inner sanctum, he finds the cult leader, Mr. Carpainter, standing in front of the same golden statue. All of Carpainter's ideas, the whole concept and execution of this new religion, came not from his own brain, but from this sparkling totem. It is called the Mani Mani statue. It speaks directly to Carpainter's mind. Somehow, this object that was embedded deep within the earth is a powerful channel for the will of Giygas. In reality, Carpainter doesn't even know why he kidnapped Paula, he was just following the instructions of the statue whose spell he is under. And in the form the cult took, we can learn something that threatens Giygas is individuality. A world where anything other than conformity is punished with violence is a world where evil can thrive. Carpainter's lightning makes him untouchable at first, so Ness will need some help. He finds Paula locked in a cabin north of town. She refers to him being destined to rescue her, but also makes it clear that if he didn't show up, she would find a way to break out herself. Paula gives Ness the Franklin badge, and this simple act of teamwork reduces Carpainter from frightening to trivial, as the badge reflects any electrical attack right back at the enemy. After the battle, the hypnotic trance affecting everyone, including Carpainter, instantly lifts, and the NPCs tend to apologize profusely, with one major exception. Carpainter's right-hand man, none other than Pokey Minch. Pokey revels in being considered an important person within the cult, and was one of the people directly responsible for kidnapping Paula. With the cult defeated, he momentarily fakes repentance, but then yells, "I lied," and runs off to cause trouble somewhere else. Ness is now free to unlock the cell, and Paula officially joins the party. Despite speaking in full sentences prior to her recruitment, as a playable character, Paula is, too, almost completely silent. It feels, at least, odd that so many one-line NPCs express more personality than the characters you spend a couple dozen hours controlling. I should mention again that I am referring to party members by their default names for simplicity's sake, but they can be named anything the player decides. There's a belief in Earthbound that if a character responds to your button presses, they should be left largely malleable. You are free to imagine a wide range of traits for Paula or Ness, and the game will never prove you wrong, as opposed to the set-in-stone characteristics of someone like Pokey. This is both a feature, giving the player some agency over the story, and, it's true, a limitation. Personally, I'm curious how Paula feels about being violently kidnapped, how that traumatic event affects her going forward, and how she might overcome it. But with the way Earthbound is written, I am left to simply imagine. With that said, the game does take some care to align the play elements with the characters' personal histories and the different strengths and weaknesses they have. Paula starts at level 1, well below Ness, showing that she is unaccustomed to combat. She has an inherently lower HP stat, indicating a bit stereotypically fragility. However, once she levels up a handful of times, her offensive power eclipses that of Ness. She has access to a broader range of powerful PSI attacks and a larger pool of PP to pull from. This reflects that she is the strongest natural psychic of all the party members, and within the narrative, it is she who can communicate across the largest distances. And, even with her pink dress and red bow, Paula does not fully line up with the RPG token girl archetype, because she is not a healer. I'll delve more into the specific gameplay distinctions between the characters and their consequences as we collect more points of comparison. For now, know that despite their shared destiny and flat affect, the heroes of Earthbound are meaningfully different from each other, with those differences conveyed mostly diagonally through the combat. Happy Happy Village was a dead end geographically, and in order to move past Tucson, Ness and Paula will need some help. The tunnel to the next town is filled with ghosts, preventing progress whether you're in a bus or on foot. The solution is roundabout. First, you need to talk to Everdread, who gives you $10,000 because he respects you. But this money is not spendable, simply remaining in your inventory as a wad of bills. Its utility is to free a jazz band from indentured servitude. The Runaway Five are stuck playing at the local theater indefinitely because they can't pay off their debt to its owner. Ness has to use Everdread's gift to get them out of their contract, after enjoying the concert, of course. For some reason, the Runaway Five have a sixth member when they're performing. Does anyone know what that's about? Good music though. Excellent moment. Afterwards, the band offers to give the kids a ride, and the loud music they play from the tour bus scares the ghosts away. Earthbound has a fondness for lowlifes. Both Everdread and the Runaway Five are far from being perceived as upstanding citizens. However, they prove to be cool, funny, and useful. And, like most rich people in this game, the theater owner is portrayed in a negative light. It is the people in less than powerful positions that are the real drivers of change in this story. Another example of this framing exists in Tucson's two resident inventors, Orange Kid and Apple Kid. Surrounding NPCs refer to Orange Kid as a genius and Apple Kid as a weirdo. They also think Orange Kid is hot for some reason. Orange Kid has a very tidy house, while Apple Kid seems to be having a rough time. They both ask Ness for an investment of $200, but Apple Kid also asks for any sort of food first. In spite of appearances though, Apple Kid is the genius and Orange Kid is a straight-up fraud. When Ness encountered an impassable pencil statue in Peaceful Rest Valley, it was Apple Kid that invented a pencil eraser at the perfect time. Your investment in Apple Kid's work, after saving him from going hungry, pays off in spades, and he remains a highly valuable ally throughout the story. Orange Kid doesn't do shit. The point is clearly not to judge a book by its cover, and the books Earthbound will remind you not to judge are those outside polite society, those who are strange or poor or hungry. Help those people, and the world unlocks. The next major location is called Threed. 1, 2, 3. Every time I notice this naming convention, my brain wants to go back and pronounce Onet as want. Onet? I don't know, I'm just gonna keep saying it like I have since I was 7 playing Melee. The theme of Threed is fear. The townspeople are mostly locked in their homes, cowering from the ghosts and zombies that have overrun the city. It's a struggle to uncover where this invasion came from and what to do about it, but eventually you find a lead or just something to follow when you see a scantily clad woman go into the hotel. But it's a trap, luring Ness and Paula into a room where they are ambushed and then locked in an underground cavern. I have genuinely no clue what the deal with this mysterious woman is. She never shows up again after this. Why did undead enemies use this tactic to attack them? My best guess is they needed a normal looking human to get the party's guard down, but y'all, I really don't have an answer for this one. In captivity, Paula's PSI is put to the test, and she reaches out to the third destined child. The 4 party members are collectively known as the Chosen Four, identified in the prophecy relayed by Buzzbuzz. While Ness needed someone to inform him, Paula seems to have an innate knowledge of this destiny, and her quote-unquote miraculous powers are necessary for everyone to unite. Her message does indeed jump across countries to reach a boy in a boarding school. His name is Jeff, and he is a nerd, and it goes without saying I mean that affectionately. Bespectacled, bow-tied, and bowl-cutted, he is the image of a straight-A student who also can't quite talk to people. From the moment the player controls him, he already has a ruler and protractor in his pocket, 2 items that are entirely useless in terms of gameplay, functioning only to inform us of his studiousness. Even though he can receive Paula's message, Jeff is unique among the party members in that he is not psychic himself. He is crucial in the war against Giygas due to his intelligence and technical resourcefulness, even though his PP will never move from 0 in any battle in the game. And like the other kids, he does not seem to question this destiny. As soon as he hears Paula's message telling him they need help and to simply head south, he knows that is what he must do immediately. Despite his self-described shyness, Jeff has a warm community at the school. His friends stock him up with supplies, no questions asked, and he seems especially close with his roommate Tony, who helps him jump the fence. I find this brief presentation of strong friendship quite poignant, to be honest. The idea that if you know someone you love has something they need to do, you should help them, even if that means being left behind. It is, like sentiments often are in this game, bittersweet. With only a cardinal direction to go off, Jeff will need some further help, which happens to come in the form of a couple of animals. First, he finds a monkey in a drugstore with an affinity for blowing bubblegum. It follows Jeff around fitfully, assisting minorly in combat as well. Second, he encounters one of the most wonderful creatures of Earthbound, of any game for that matter, Tessie, who gives Jeff and the bubble monkey a ride across the river. Tessie is a serene being. Its expression is placid yet majestic. I would die for Tessie. These animal companions show that nature, while depicted often as harsh and unfair, can, under the right circumstances, be helpful and kind. Jeff helps the monkey not because he knew that a sea cryptid would only rise from the water if it saw a bubble-blowing primate, but because he wanted to help the monkey. Animals are usually enemies that need to be fought in this game, but they can also be another type of friend if you treat them well. In a similar vein, the only way, minus items, to restore PP along the routes between locations that have just enough length and windingness to verge on exhausting is magic butterflies. Encountering a butterfly will, with a flash of purple, make the party relax. Nature has a recurring role to play in our protagonist's success. There's one more character Jeff meets on his way south I'll briefly mention. A strange, friendly man named Brick Road who is really into building dungeons. He shows back up later even more strangely, and I've got a take of the century on what he represents, so stay tuned for that. But the last person Jeff meets on his solo quest is not a friend, hardly an acquaintance either. It's his father, the legendary scientist Dr. Andonuts. The doctor works alone in a blocky metallic lab, his genius evidenced by writing E = mc squared on the chalkboard and nothing else. Truly a visionary. They have not seen each other since Jeff was a toddler. After some awkward small talk, the doctor offers Jeff the use of his personal flying saucer to reach his destination. Apparently figuring a few sentences was enough father-son bonding for a decade, Andonut says see you again in 10 years, and off Jeff goes. The scientist's emotional distance is a bit hard to parse. He actually becomes a key player in a pivotal section of the late game, so I'll explore my thoughts on him then. Jeff, while probably a tad more described than the first two, does encounter the same limitation as the other party members. How does he feel about his absent father? How does he feel about Tony's overt affection toward him? We simply do not get to know. The spaceship reaches Threed with a bang, allowing Jeff to free Ness and Paula, but at the expense of his vehicle. They quickly work together to vaporize some ghosts and trap all the zombies in a tent with the help of another Deus Ex Machina invention from Apple Kid, and that won't be the last of those. On their way north to find the source of this undead invasion, the party finds, nestled in a verdant valley, yet another type of friend. Mr. Saturn. Populating this village are pink, rubbery creatures with bows on their singular hairs. They are jovial, bouncy, inviting. Their speech is written in a font like a child's handwriting. They are all named Mr. Saturn, except for this one, who is Dr. Saturn. The Saturns, wherever they came from, have built a bona fide society. All the amenities needed by the party are present in their own pink and bouncy forms. But there are quirks that differentiate Saturn Valley from human towns, like the ladders and ledges that lead nowhere, or how they don't charge at all for lodging or medical care. After all the cynical quips from the human NPCs, it's refreshing to be in a place where everyone is friendly and positive, even if the font kinda hurts my brain to read. There is an optimism, or perhaps naivete, conveyed by the Saturns, like all the bad things in the world are less visible to their eyes. However, they are distinctly not unintelligent, just seeming to operate on a different level of perception than the rest of us. The Saturns are also disappearing one by one. In order to rescue them and fully liberate Threed, Ness and his friends must infiltrate the factory commanded by Master Belch, a follower of Giygas and the one responsible for all the chaos in the region. This building is hidden behind a waterfall and only accessible by password. As provided by Mr. Saturn, the password is to wait 3 minutes. So, how's everyone's day been? Good. Yeah, I'm alright. Just a little tired, but what else is new? This video is taking forever to finish. Thank you. I'm glad you're liking it so far. Well, we're gonna be here for a second, so feel free to stand up, take a stretch, grab some water, make some instant noodles, whatever. Consider this an intermission, if you will. Actually, I'll be right back myself. Okay, it's wild how long 3 minutes can feel sometimes. You guys like sports? Yeah, no, of course you don't. What am I talking about? Sorry, I've never been good at small talk. I'll just be quiet till the password finishes. Hey, I can see that. There is a point to doing this, but I can't just explain it. No more editorializing, please. It's not the editor's job to question the writer, even if you're also me. Shh, the password should be almost done now. Ah, thank Christ. Master Belch and his army of smaller piles of barf are surprisingly capable of intricate organization. Each of these slimy little piles has a group of zombies under their command and refer to themselves as mortal enemies of humankind. They too are a sort of society capable of politics and industry. Kidnapped and enslaved Mr. Saturn's toil in this factory, producing the Vomit's favorite food of fly honey. Giygas lent Master Belch enough power to dominate the other sapient beings in the area, assumedly under the condition he would try to stop Ness. The boss battle is nauseating. It genuinely makes me queasy to look at Belch for too long, and the burp sound effect they use is just too real. Belch is made much easier of a fight by throwing fly honey at him, causing him to waste turns scarfing it down. Defeating him returns all the Saturns to their valley, and Threed's colors brighten. If I can find a through line for the broader Threed section of the game, it would be otherness. The townsfolk are terrified of an invasion of a different sort of life. The Saturns and Little Barfs are intelligent in their own ways, but with fundamentally different perspectives on life than humans. The regional villain was disrupting the equilibrium, mostly for the sake of his own gluttony. The solution then requires listening to what the Saturns have to say, understanding their ideas as valuable, even if they're hard to comprehend. Here we see that something that benefits Giygas is division between life forms, and the answer is cooperation. However, I don't really think this forms into a totally coherent point, largely because of a lingering question. Am I supposed to feel bad for the zombies? They aren't mindless, speaking fluently and yes, aggressively, but clearly they have inner worlds. After saving Threed, though, all the zombies and ghosts are locked up in cages forever. Shouldn't we just let them lurch back into the forest? And for that matter, maybe the little barfs aren't quite so hateful now that Giygas' influence has dissipated, like the cult victims from a town over, but we can't know because they all simply vanish. The disgust reaction created in the player is never then challenged. It's possible this is a thoughtful contradiction, that now the citizens of Threed are doing to the zombies just what the zombies did to them. But if that is the intended framing, the game never provides clarity, and maybe it's as simple as that it didn't conceive of the zombies as also being a life form deserving of sympathy. If not quite universal, Earthbound sympathies are beyond any doubt widespread. In every corner of its universe there are friends to be found in all shapes and sizes. Whatever flatness is present in the controllable characters, it is made up for in plentiful, colorful allies who brim with eclectic joy. Even if Ness is destined to be the one to ultimately defeat Giygas, it takes a village to save the Earth, and it takes the Earth to save a village. However, I fear I have not yet communicated the range of Earthbound's experience. In every corner of its universe, there are also vexations. Oh boy, does this game make you go through some shit. By now, the mischievous nature of Earthbound's combat has truly made itself known. Basically, things can go very wrong at any time for no particular reason. To start, the enemies aren't random encounters, but rather exist individually in the overworld. In addition to making the world look livelier, this gives the player an illusion of control over how many battles they take on. In practice, though, most enemies are so much faster than Ness that you will have no choice but encountering a boatload of them anytime you go anywhere. Attempting to avoid battles is usually fruitless and risks the enemy touching Ness's back, which gives it a free turn. Furthermore, they spawn in highly variable quantities and spacings, meaning it can be up to chance whether you have to win a simple fight against one enemy or a truly daunting one against 4, and the run option is unreliable to say the least. Within the battles, there are plenty more ways for things to spiral out of control. When I initially labeled the combat as expressive, I did not mean that the player has lots of room for self-expression, I meant the game has lots of room to express itself onto you. Both misses and critical hits are quite common, and the base damage calculation itself has a lot of random fuzzing. It's not infrequent for enemies to know powerful attacks that usually won't land but are devastating when they do. Alternatively, enemies will often do things like laugh, smile, or fall over, which simply wastes a turn, providing an easy opening. Status effects are fairly common and often debilitating, especially if the party is low on PP, and the methods for restoring PP out of towns are limited and also randomized. All of this makes the outcome outcome of any given battle or even any individual turn difficult to predict unless you dramatically outlevel the opponent. Ultimately, the numbers are weighted in the player's favor, and Earthbound isn't a game I would consider hard, but with such variability from so many directions and such a high quantity of required battles, chances are that things will go explosively wrong once or twice an hour. Deaths are pretty forgiving though, Ness simply waking up at the last save point while losing 0 experience or items and only half the cash on hand. Just giving it a couple more tries will usually get you through, but the constant potential for disaster keeps the player on edge, wary of whatever this world will throw at them next, and it certainly has a lot to throw. One of the most distinctive status effects is mushroomization, most commonly incurred right outside Tucson. In battle, it makes the characters confused, choosing random actions, but its truly unique quality is that outside of battle, it inverts the player's controls. Except it's not actually a simple inversion, but a scrambling of which direction goes where, and as soon as you get used to it, it changes to a different arrangement. And the only way to cure it is to physically visit a hospital or this one specific NPC. So any encounter with the humble-seeming ramblin' mushroom can result in the player having to spend several minutes drunkenly stumbling across town to get de-mushroomized, and am I having any fun? Is this what fun is? Why is the game making me do this? Earthbound worships minor inconvenience. Everything that helps the player is first wrapped in crinkly paper, trivial in the grand scheme, but indeed time-consuming in the moment. Do you want to store some items to free up your very limited inventory? Well, you'll have to find a phone and call the Escargot Express delivery service. In a few minutes, the delivery man will find you and charge you $18. He can then take a maximum of 3 items off your hands. If you need to store more than that, you'll have to go back to the phone, wait a few more minutes, and pay another $18. Do you want to revive your team after losing a battle? Well, Ness will spawn back in with full health but no PP, so you'll have to pay for a night at the hotel to get him to full strength. Any other party members will instead be all the way across town at the hospital, where you'll have to fork over another substantial fee to heal them. Locking life-saving medical care behind a paywall, how American. All of these systems are kept 2 steps more complicated than they strictly need to be, and none of it makes Earthbound any more fun. It does, however, make the game more relatable. All the little frustrations the player endures exist, I think, for essentially the same reason that it actually makes you go the right way up the escalator. Verisimilitude. In a story where children are navigating the real world for the first time, it is honest to depict how that world will not serve you. Necessary actions will be slow, aggravating, and expensive for no good reason, and you'll just have to get used to that. The game furthermore contains a multitude of what could be called practical jokes, like the aforementioned 3-minute password or giving the player a bicycle that can only be used when Ness is alone, rendering it unusable for the entire rest of the story once Paula joins the party. Playing Earthbound is in no way a power trip. In order to connect with it, the player must accept themselves as not its master, but a simple participant, subject always to its capricious whims. A game that only ever seeks to make the player feel good is inherently limited from a storytelling perspective. A game that sometimes makes you feel bad for the sake of making you feel bad has power. And in the end, Earthbound does know when to let up. Once the player has proven they can overcome frustration, they are often rewarded with kindness. After the characters become stronger, weak enemies run away from you and any encounter ends immediately while still delivering the expected experience points. There is a unique mercy in how the game handles strong enemy attacks, where the HP bar has to actually scroll to 0 before the character faints. This provides a small window of time for the player to heal or just finish the battle quickly and escape alive, even if the numbers said they should have already lost. Such a quirk only functions to give the player grace for once rather than additional frustration, most relevant against the enemies that explode when you beat them, like the territorial oak. But that's another thing. Why do mother games think trees explode? Not to brag or anything, but I've been around a lot of trees and they almost always either stand still or slightly sway. Very occasionally they fall over. They do not ever explode. Why do they do that? Why is it looking at me like that? What is going on? The game does want everyone who plays it to finish the experience. It's just that setbacks and inconveniences are inalienable aspects of that experience that can't be compromised. so there is a dedicated hint NPC to point any lost souls in the right direction, but he still charges $75 for his services. So Jeff and Paula start at level 1, but the experience curve and enemy placement make catching them up much less tedious than you'd think. So leveling up provides highly variable stat increases, sometimes barely moving the needle, but sometimes gifting huge upgrades in a single stroke. A world that can be either mean or nice, depending on the weather. Obviously, realism is not a strict priority in a story with time-traveling aliens, but how Earthbound makes you, the player, feel is, in a sense, realistic. It reminds me of how there's a bike in the garage I haven't ridden in a year and a half because the tire's flat and I lost the air pump. Or how I had to cancel a weekend road trip I was excited for because I got sick at exactly the wrong time. Or how I'm frightened to go to the doctor for anything short of a broken leg. I am more inclined to believe what a story has to say, especially one that is ultimately optimistic, if it acknowledges the anxieties that intersect everything you do in a world that is trying to make you lose. Not many games do that, for me at least. Earthbound does. East of Threed, there is a much larger city called Foreside, already mentioned so frequently that it is clear it is a destination where things will go down, and down things certainly will go. First though, the party must brave a traffic jam and then a dusty desert. As far as convenient gaming roadblocks go, what could be more American than soul-crushing traffic? Every Eagleland city is connected by roads and buses, but the developers also want you to actually see everything they drew, so a hike through the surrounding southwesty desert is mandatory. The desert has little in terms of narrative progression, but is a stellar example of how Earthbound gets the player to keep falling for its jokes. If you have a sharp eye, there are 3 opportunities to help people within this area. First, you may find some contact lenses in the sand and a sign saying who is looking for them. Oh, I know how games work. If I go out of my way to deliver these to their owner, I'll be rewarded with prize money or a useful item or something, right? Second, there is a foreman-looking guy who wants to dig for buried gold, but is too hungry to start. Third, there are 2 singular pixels, one black and one white, on opposite sides of the desert. They are sesame seeds, and they are going through a rough patch in their relationship, but want to make up. One of these 3 quests, if you can call them that, is completely essential to progress, and the other 2 are borderline useless. Can you guess which is which? Answer now on your phones. If the player does deliver the contact lenses, their reward is a pair of dirty socks. Apparently they can stun the enemy for a turn, but this is an underwhelming prize. Talking to both sesame seeds prompts some new dialogue, but it doesn't lead anywhere. There is certainly no reward, and not even any way to see them reunite. Feeding the construction worker is the required action. What gives? Does the game want you to help people or not? This is a flaunting of the traditional feedback loop of video games, where any good action corresponds to some number going up. And the whole time, the player must contend with the annoyance of the desert's sunstroke effect, slowly whittling away your HP until cured by healing PSI or a wet towel. Earthbound wants you to do the right thing, even if it's annoying and even if it won't directly benefit you. Sometimes it will, but far from always. The game crafts its world so that the player simply will keep running at the football, even if they know it could be yanked away. Past the desert and a fancy suspension bridge is Foreside at last. Its skyscrapers and alleyways tie it to the image of New York City, and it is intimidatingly large at first, even if the number of enterable buildings is still in the single digits. It even has a dinosaur museum with precisely 1 fossil in it. The talk of the town here is someone named Geldegard Monotoli, a businessman who recently rose from obscurity to dominate the city economically and politically. The citizens are split on whether his influence on Foreside is a boon or a curse. High in his steel tower, Monotoli isn't taking an audience, but you know who is? Say hello to Pokey Minch once again. He is, by some turn of events, Monotoli's business partner, living in a Trumpian golden apartment. Pokey's speech is haughty and laced with contempt for Ness and his friends. Clearly, he thinks he's won some sort of game. What the player needs to actually do here isn't quick to reveal itself, and the department store is closed, so you might as well check out the local entertainment. Here you find the Runaway Five owe the Forsyth Theater owner $1 million. God damn it, guys, I leave you alone for 10 seconds. So now is the time to follow up on that prospecting in the desert, but what's waiting for you is an underground labyrinth replete with obnoxious enemy battles. It takes, conservatively, eons to find and defeat the 5 mini-bosses here, and you are liable to get heavily earthbounded along the way, by which I mean screwed over for no good reason. As much as I am generally willing to defend the game's frustrating elements as valuable in their own way, this area in particular pushes my own tolerance for tedium. And I like most of the humor in this game, but can someone explain to me what the joke is that each of the moles claims to be the third strongest? It's like one of those New Yorker comics where I'm expecting to chuckle, but it just bounces off my brain like a wet tennis ball. At the end, Ness earns a diamond, which can be traded for the Runaway Five's freedom once again. But as soon as you win one group's freedom, someone else's is taken away. Paula gets kidnapped from right under your nose. Ness and Jeff must fight to the top floor of the department store to confront this alien abductor. The department store is a massive goddamn difficulty spike for no clear reason. Many of the enemies wield what are essentially one-hit KO moves, and how many you have to fight is, as always, largely up to chance. I'm sure this section was intended to be challenging, but this degree of intensity feels less considered than it does sloppy. In my experience on both playthroughs I've done, this is the single hardest part of the game, and it's not even narratively remarkable. The department store spook is not an interesting villain in the slightest, just your standard loyal minion of Giygas. The difficulty does convey how important Paula is to the team's success, but that could have been shown without jerking the slider quite this hard to the right. For anyone who chafed against my earlier defense of all the inconvenience built into Earthbound, let it be known that I do not think it was accomplished without flaw. Even after Ness and Jeff's retail gauntlet, Paula is not freed yet, now being held captive by Monotole himself. For the girl to be kidnapped a second time is a bit eye-rolling in current year, of course, but Giygas putting so much effort into separating the children has meaning. Their power is multiplied by their teamwork. Paula's absence after the player had gotten used to relying on her creates a friction which reflects that idea. The two boys follow clues around Forsyth, ending up in a sleazy cafe where they serve cappuccino. According to Everdread, who may or may not be dying, Monotole has hidden the Mani Mani statue somewhere in here. Checking behind the bar causes something strange to happen. Welcome to Moonside. Here, yes is no and no is yes. Within this neon psychedelic nightmare is an alternate version of Forsyth, building a location scrambled and NPCs teleporting you from end to end before you can even start to orient yourself. It is a land of opposites and abstraction. The bright outlines of a familiar world shine, but the connective tissue is mangled. Moonside is dizzying. It's also cool as hell, right? There's an allure to this space. I feel drawn into it, trying fervently to comprehend it even as it stubbornly resists comprehension. The NPCs speak either nonsense or garbled gibberish. The enemies represented by flames in the overworld are, in fact, fire hydrants. Eventually, Ness is followed by an invisible man who claims to have a gold tooth. Who is he? Does he want anything? Why is his presence what allows you to progress to Moonside's core? It's all a bit like trying to decipher an unknown language. Moonside is not exclusively a hostile place, just operating under strange and unfamiliar rules. In front of the Moon Monotole building stands the Mani Mani statue. Ness and Jeff must fight and destroy it, the statue glimmering in combat with a pink and purple sheen. Following their victory, the party finds themselves in the cafe's storeroom. The game states that the Mani Mani statue was actually a device that creates illusions. Moonside was a mirage. That neon, upside-down, inviting world was entirely imagined. However, the experience gained, items collected, and money accrued remain in the party's possession. Even if Moonside was literally an illusion, there was a realness to it, an illusion with tangibility and purpose. The Mani Mani statue convinces otherwise regular people to do strange and sinister things, and it does so by enveloping them in illusions that, we can assume, promise the individual fame or fortune or power. The form of the statue resembles those most common desires, cast in gold depicting a muscled man holding a sword, the image of avarice and domination. It emanates the sort of ideas that cause people to single-mindedly pursue desire at the expense of others, to become liars and cult leaders and billionaires. This is Earthbound's full perspective on America, or even modern society broadly, that it is sick, stuck in illusions of grandeur created by greed, and greed is ultimately a servant of total destruction. Interesting in Earthbound's depiction of greed is the statue's ambiguous alienness. Its discovery and subsequent influence coincides exactly with the meteorite falling, and it is explicitly a tool of Giygas. What is never explained is why it was so deep underground. Was it created by Giygas and placed there? Or, perhaps, was it already within the foundation of Eagle Land, a remnant of the past that happened to be a perfect conduit? Giygas is an alien that causes cruel human behavior to proliferate, framing cruelty itself as an unnatural force acting on society from somewhere else rather than born within it. However, depending on how one interprets the statue's location, the story could also be saying that greed is innate to the fabric of humanity, always ready to receive and amplify sinister forces. The Mani Mani is a fascinating, complex, and cloudy symbol, the details of its creation left underground enough for several potential meanings to sprout regarding how and where evil came to be. And perhaps this is all an early indication that Giygas is not so distant from humanity as he may seem. Whatever Earthbound may or may not say about the origin of greed, one thing it certainly yells is that it is destructible. Ness and Jeff are able to smash the Mani Mani statue to bits. I believe this is because they are relatively innocent to the vices Giygas used to tempt the story's adults. The illusion the boys see seeks to disorient rather than promise riches, like the statue knew they would not be susceptible to its usual tricks. Moonside is, to my eye, a depiction of how frightening, baffling, and yet enticing the real world feels when you are first forced to navigate it. Nothing is as you were told, yes is no, and maps are useless. So much effort is spent understanding it that it's hard to imagine changing it. Yet we must. We may get lost or distracted or dazzled in our own Moonside, but to those with clear and steady eyes it is simply a neon smokescreen. You can still pierce through to the central problem and shatter it. This is not, however, the last time Mani Mani appears in the game. With the statue gone for now, Monotoli's tower finally opens up. Getting to the top, however, will require help from some old friends. First, Applegate invents a dispenser for what is inexplicably Monotoli's favorite food, trout-flavored yogurt. Gross! The yogurt earns you access to the building's upper level. Second, there is a volatile boss battle on the top floor against the adorable, clumsy robot who wastes most of its turns but does devastating damage when it finally attacks. This potentially tough battle is cut short when the Runaway Five burst into the room and turn the robot off for you. Wherever Ness and friends go, the people they've helped will be there to help them right back. Monotoli himself is a pushover. He's nothing more than a weak old man who was caught up in Giygas' illusions. The spell over him broke with the statue, and he willingly lets Paula go and tells the team where they should head next, even offering his helicopter as transport. He never meant to cause any harm, and returning to Foresight later shows he gave up his powerful positions entirely. The Foresight section rounds out many of Earthbound's messages, particularly the political ones. It's a story essentially set in America about how greed is evil, and therefore it unavoidably is an anti-capitalist narrative. Monotoli is clearly a play on Monopoly. His actions are, in the game's view, the sort of thing done by real American businessmen in their steel skyscrapers. Hoard wealth while the city below them suffers. From the police to the church to the C-suite, Earthbound skewers the most powerful people of today's economic and political systems, depicting them all as doing the bidding of the universal cosmic destroyer. At the same time, it believes they can all be healed. Its depiction of America is, in addition to everything else, undeniably romantic as well. Earthbound is both condemnatory of our greed-worshipping world and convinced of its frailty, that something kinder is a broken idol away. After Foresight, the story's messaging becomes swimmier and more introspective, and our characters go well beyond Eagle Land. The immediate task is to go somewhere named Summers, but the helicopter has already been rudely commandeered by Pokey. Even with the Mani Mani destroyed, Pokey is behaving just the same as before. If Earthbound is optimistic about the goodness of humanity, why is this one character so resistant to positive change? Pokey rattles off a few more vicious insults and flies away. We have strange places and emotions yet to see. Let's explore some of the oddest locations and characters of Earthbound's second half, and finally arrive at the fourth party member, a character who seems to confront the game's core ideas. Earthbound figures now is about time to introduce fast travel, but both learning and using PSI teleport is, characteristically, a pain. The only teacher is a levitating guru named Tala Rama, who lives in yet another underground labyrinth. This one is filled with monkeys. After navigating the twists and turns and endless monkey-mandated busywork, Tala Rama imparts the skill and some encouragement. He also says that, in truth, all things are predetermined. How little control we have over our lives and what that ultimately means is an idea the game has been swimming in circles around for a while. We are getting closer. I am starting to feel its wake. The way PSI teleport works is that Ness has to sprint for a long stretch of ground before taking off. If you so much as brush against a pixel, the move will fail. The party can now travel to anywhere any one of them has been before, but they have to find a whole ass runway first. Even if this hurdle isn't huge, there's still no free lunch. With the help of Dr. Andonuts, who seems to ignore Jeff in favor of talking to Ness, the Skyrunner is fixed and plops the group right on a sunny beach in Summers. Summers is Mediterranean, perhaps the south of France if anywhere specific. People here have a little too much money and ego. Equipment prices are exorbitant, the view from the upscale restaurant is stunning, but they refuse to serve Ness's favorite food. There is a spot called Club Stoic where people stare at a stone and say things like, "You guys can't envision the final collapse of capitalism?" Finally, video essayist representation in gaming. The party only has another of Monotoli's clues to work with. They need to find out more about a pyramid. And what do you know, there are hieroglyphics on display at the local museum, but an employee won't let you view them without a pricey bribe. Again, adults distracted by money and status are a hindrance to saving the world. If only they had a sudden influx of royalty-level wealth, but that seems unlikely. There is also a strange phone call where the player is asked to type out their own name. This is not immediately relevant, but you will need to store it in the back of your mind. Glossing over some details as to why, Ness will eventually find himself eating a quote-unquote magic cake from a beachside vendor. The cake causes his vision to blur and distort, and he falls into a vivid dream. Now we are introduced to a country far to the east named Dalam. It appears to be an amalgamation of different cultures, some elements distinctly South Asian and others East Asian, but in some certainly foreign to everywhere Earthbound has previously been. The player soon takes control of the country's crown prince. His name is Pooh, and I won't be making any jokes about that. Both set to inherit fabulous wealth and popular with the local girls, this is a boy with privilege. He is already level 15, but you encounter him at an unusual time in his life. He is about to undergo some sort of trial to complete some sort of training. In a corner of the city there is a spire called Mu, the place of nothingness. Here Pooh must meditate and make his mind blank to succeed. Soon a phantom appears before him, accompanied by the battle UI. It says, "I am the spirit of your ancient lineage. To complete your trial, I am going to break your legs. You will lose the use of them. Do you accept this?" So, Prince Pooh, you cannot walk as your legs are broken. Next, I will tear your arms off. I shall then take your arms and feed them to the crows. The taking of your arms. Do you accept this? Ah, Prince Pooh. Without legs and arms, you can only lie there. Now, I'll cut your ears off. You do not mind my taking your hearing away, do you? Do you accept this? So, Prince Pooh, no legs, no arms, and no sound. By floating words through the air, I must ask you, do you care if I take your eyes? Do you want to live in eternal darkness? I shall steal your sight. Do you accept this? So, Prince Pooh, now I can only communicate directly with your mind. Your mind is all you have left. In the end, I will take your mind, though you probably don't want to allow that, do you? So, you can't answer? You can't even move? Are you sad? Are you lonely? If you lose your mind, you also lose any feelings of sadness. Do you accept this? I will take your mind, Prince Pooh. Know that I will possess it. Well, that was harrowing. Pooh then stands up, his training complete. But is it still him? Might the original Pooh now be non-existent, his body possessed by an ancient ghost? For all we know, that may be the case. For a couple reasons, I do think it is more likely that this experience was a test of his willpower and dedication to his training, that what the spirit took was not taken permanently. First of all, if you decline any of the later questions, Pooh can stand up and walk around, his legs clearly unbroken. Second, after a vassal congratulates him on completing his training, he looks diagonally out upon the pink clouds, a small touch which implies to me reflection on what just happened to him. Whether Pooh's mind, eyes, sound, arms, and legs were restored or not, the ordeal being a necessity for progression through the game says there is some degree of truth to it, that being willing to forgo absolutely everything in service of a greater purpose is simply a prerequisite. And layered on top of everything is that this was introduced as a dream of Ness's. It wasn't a dream. Pooh is the fourth and final party member, he and his homeland are real. Rather than dreaming, Ness's consciousness was psychically transported to Dalam, but to what degree his spirit was present for this sequence is ambiguous. Was he a simple observer, or did he endure the full agony of Moo training right alongside Pooh? Maybe he even had some influence over Pooh's actions. The details are left a mystery, but a message still rings clear. Pooh is someone born into fortune and power who, as a matter of responsibility, becomes someone with no control over his own life. Everything he does is dictated by a master or phantom or prophecy. Upon return to the palace, Pooh gains 3 levels, tying his experience to the mundane game language of expanded ability, and learns PSI Teleport Beta. Without a second thought, he teleports right to the other party members and verbally commits himself to being Ness's servant. None of Pooh's subservience is counteracted or discouraged by the story. It is his straightforward destiny to give up everything he has and is. That, to Earthbound, is right. Already in Pooh's inventory is a very valuable gemstone, which he quickly gives to the museum guy for access to the mission-critical hieroglyphs. Finally a complete team, the party now takes a boat ride south. Along the way is a boss battle against a creature which is referred to as the Kraken, but does not look anything like a traditional Kraken at all. Not sure what happened there. Fighting together for the first time demonstrates the power this group now has, and the Kraken, which had dominated the sea, is soundly defeated. With everyone gathered, now feels like the right time to finally elaborate on the differences in combat abilities between the characters and their subtle narrative implications. Ness is simultaneously a powerhouse, tank, and healer. He consistently does the most damage with his basic attacks, has the most HP, and his healing is essential for keeping Paula and Jeff alive in tough battles. Add in his ability to dish out huge psychic damage and he sounds simply like an overpowered character, but he has some interesting limitations. Ness is the slowest party member, and his pool of PP is fairly small, so he can sometimes get overwhelmed by fast enemies, and using him as a healer reduces his ability as an attacker and vice versa. PSI Rockin', while strong, is his only offensive PSI move and lacks versatility, being more useful against hordes of weak enemies than singular bosses, and consuming more PP than similarly strong moves used by Paula and Pooh. All this leaves us with a picture of Ness as a strong fighter who can be helpful in multiple ways, but who is perhaps lacking in finesse or maneuverability. As a weapon, he is strong, but also heavy and blunted. His raw talent can sweep simple encounters, but the more challenging the battle, the more sluggish he can feel, and the more he needs to be played responsive to the situation rather than leading the attack. This combat style then fleshes out his narrative position as default team leader, showing that he has enough poise to know when leadership means taking on a supportive role. Paula is your glass cannon. She has the lowest HP value but the highest PP value, allowing her to continue a sustained onslaught of psychic attacks as long as the others can keep her conscious, which is often tricky. Her arsenal of PSI Freeze, Fire, and Thunder all target the enemy in different ways, allowing her offense to flex to the battle's shape. However, her physical attack, while not useless, definitely pales in comparison damage-wise to her psychic one, so any enemy that counters PSI severely hinders her utility. At least that is until later in the game when Paula learns an array of buffs and debuffs, allowing her to draw greater potential out of her teammates whenever she cannot personally provide the DPS. She can also pray. Praying results in one of a handful of random effects, usually positive but sometimes negative. It can provide modest healing, cause everyone to cry uncontrollably, or even revive all party members and enemies. Stack that all together with her being the fastest party member, and Paula is your best bet for a quick finishing blow, or a game-saving protective spell, or a Hail Mary to rescue a nearly lost encounter, as long as she doesn't faint to a random crit first. So, when alone, Paula has clear shortcomings, but as a member of a group, she can shine as perhaps the most talented of all, the tip of the spear in the battle against the dark. Jeff is, on the other hand, the least talented. As mentioned already, he has no psychic moves, and his physical attacks are serviceable, but always substantially weaker than Ness's. Instead, his best offensive option is battle items like bottle rockets, bombs, and bazookas. He does not, however, have any larger an inventory than anyone else, so for him to best contribute in combat, his items must be carefully rationed within dungeons and regularly restocked at every opportunity, and said items are only sold by specific vendor NPCs in odd locations. Furthermore, to bring out Jeff's full potential, the player has to keep some of his inventory slots filled with items that are literally broken. Every time the party rests, Jeff has a chance of repairing one of these, and most of his strongest items and weapons can only be obtained through this method. All in all, Jeff is a high-maintenance character. His utility in battle correlates with how much mental energy the player spends managing his mechanics, reflecting how his lack of psychic gifts demands he work harder and smarter than the others in order to fulfill his destiny. It is Jeff's intellect and diligence that make him stand out, but crucially the player must participate in that work for him to activate. He won't simply tell you the enemy's weakness, the player must spend a turn instructing him to spy first. I construct this to mean that, unlike the lonely, isolated labor of his father, Jeff's genius is motivated by others, inspired by those he cares about. Pooh is a jack of all trades, capable of filling many roles, but unlikely to be the very best at any of them. The player first explores his combat style as the party follows the hieroglyphs clues through the region of Scaraba with its obligatory Sphinx, Mummy, and Pyramid. His PSI toolset is unique in that he can use attacking, healing, and supporting moves. The downside is that he doesn't— oh, Pooh's gone already. The move sensei whirls in and tells Pooh to come with him to learn a secret attack, specifying that he has no choice in the matter. That was quick. Guess I ran out of time to analyze him. Sorry, I'll try to be faster next time. I'm really trying to work on ameliorating the verbosity of my scripts. Can you tell? I go so in depth here to show that while it is rare for the main characters to speak and even rare for them to visibly emote, which can at times be frustrating, their battle parameters gradually, naturally mold in the player's mind a more complex idea of who they are as people than could be gleaned by solely reading the game's text boxes. Now, this style of character building is highly open to interpretation, and my own assessment here, while honest, is dependent on my specific experience with the game. There are other ways these characters can be used that will in turn influence how each player understands them. At the end of the day, you do retain a lot of agency over the personhood of these characters, but not all of it. A bit further in the desert, the party encounters someone else whose personhood has changed. Brick Road, the dungeon maker from Winters, has been transformed into Dungeon Man. This tower is now his body. Inside is a vertical dungeon, which, it should be said, is rather rough and incomplete. The layout is visually dry and derivative, the music is genuinely upsetting, but Brick Road proudly takes credit for writing it nonetheless. The floor is littered with signs written by Brick Road explaining his intentions and perspective with this design. Even if this dungeon has room for improvement, Brick Road clearly has a passion for the craft, cares deeply about his creation, which is now one and the same with himself. Dungeon Man is art and artist at once. On the top floor, the party finds his real face embedded in the stone wall. He expresses no horror or regret at this state of being. This was his life's dream, and he seems fulfilled. You exit through a series of holes, and Dungeon Man joins the party. He is incredibly strong in battle, consistently one-hit KOing the desert enemies, but after walking about 50 feet he gets stuck behind a couple trees forever. Dungeon Man refers to it as his eternal resting place. This is, of course, quite funny, to immediately deprive the player of a powerful ally, but also there is a real poignancy to this, that someone so invested in creating experiences for others would be rendered immobile, unable to attain new experiences himself. Still though, he does not lament his choices. He followed his purpose, and if that means being stuck in this one place forever, then he accepts it. Brick Road is a writer, musician, and game developer. I view his character as a brief meditation on the purpose and restrictions of being an artist. According to Earthbound, if you truly commit yourself to creating for others, you also commit yourself to being left behind. Those who experience your work can proceed far beyond your own imagination. The provider of the art can see only a fraction of its full beauty. It is wonderful that there are dungeon men, even if they all get stuck in the sand. The sacrifice is worth it, the art is worth it, and what's more beautiful yet is that that's true even if your work is a little mediocre. Am I making any sense? Whether I am or not, in order to continue their quest, the team must find a submarine within Brick Road's walls and use it to travel beyond the horizon where he himself could never follow. They arrive at a dense swamp named Deep Darkness. Initially, it is completely unnavigable until illumination by an object found in the pyramid. But even in the light, it is a miserable place. The team trudges at snail's pace through sickly green water, battles rotten flowers and electric eels, and passes by the wreckage of Pokey's helicopter. Eventually, they are confronted by none other than Master Belch, rocking a new color and title. In the middle of the fight, without warning, Pooh swoops in and uses his new ultimate technique, PSI Starstorm, to destroy the barf for good. His time undergoing training apart from the team evidently lending him new power, Pooh rejoins the party, and everybody carries on like nothing happened. There is no expression of surprise or excitement, certainly no elation. They march forward. Around this point, Earthbound opens up for a bit. The hieroglyph mentioned underground passage at the end of Deep Darkness is blocked for now, and the party has the freedom to fairly easily travel to all the game's previous locations. It's a particularly good time to make sure you visited as many Your Sanctuary locations as possible and recorded their parts of the melody. After spending so much time in very American locales, the second half of the game really turns into a globe-trotting adventure. I will say, and I promise not to belabor this point, that Earthbound relies a little more heavily than ideal on stereotypes of real cultures to build out its world. One particular thing that bothered me was how barren Scaraba's building interiors are, as if Egypt couldn't possibly have the same amenities as America or Europe. Again, 1994, I know, but I still think it's worth this footnote at minimum. Ultimately, the broadening of these settings serves the game's aspirations of universality. If you're going to save the world, Earthbound Believes, you should see a lot of it along the way. Eventually, the player is funneled back to the next required story beat, rescuing a handful of important NPCs like Applekid, Dr. Andonuts, and Tony from an underground base all the way back in Winters. Giygas' henchmen have been slowly kidnapping people who could be helpful to the Chosen Four and detaining them in large tubes. After fighting through a lot of silvery monsters in this twisty, iridescent stronghold, and I mean a lot, the party defeats Starman Deluxe, who laments that the prophecy may come true after all. And, naturally, your friends walk free, Applekid giving Ness the key to return to Deep Darkness and progress to the game's final sequence. I'm lingering, though, on the cold callousness of the specific way Giygas had these characters trapped, in small glass capsules, barely able to breathe. It is an obvious cruelty to restrain people like this, symbolic of Giygas' disregard for the value of humanity as a whole. And yet, how is it so different than the way Earthbound treats many of its important characters? From the Mu training to Dungeon Man's fate to the prophecy the whole plot revolves around, there are many cases where people in this story are expected to give up everything to serve others. Pooh is a jack of all trades in combat. However, because of his smaller pool of PP, he cannot fill every role at once and will never truly excel at any of them. Because he joined so late in the game, he will feel noticeably underleveled for most if not all the time the player has access to him. He cannot stomach the same healing items or use the same weapons as the other party members, and the weapons he can use are very rare, making it frustrating to bring out his full potential. Pooh's unique battle action is called Mirror, temporarily transforming into the enemy and using its powers, but also ceding all control afterwards, fully becoming something other than himself for the rest of the battle. It fails half the time anyway. Even PSI Starstorm is not as truly exceptional as one might anticipate, only matching but not exceeding the strength of PSI Freeze or Rockin' Omega. The impression I get of Pooh from combat is, true to the narrative, someone whose individuality has been repressed to enhance his utility. Yet he is not extraordinarily useful, just moderately useful. Everything considered, it is hard for me to imagine that Pooh is actually friends with Ness or Paula or Jeff. Was it worth it? I do have an answer, my answer anyway, to why Earthbound treats its characters like this, but it took a strange route to arrive at my brain. One place to start is where Giygas' secret base was located. It was directly under Stonehenge. That is a powerful detail. Stick with me for this next part, if you dare. The Sirens of Titan is a 1959 science fiction novel by Kurt Vonnegut. It features, among other things, an alien invasion, psychic communication, and time travel, in a sense at least. It is largely about free will. There are many striking, memorable sequences in The Sirens of Titan, but my personal favorite has to be the time spent in the depths of a cave system on Mercury. On the cave walls cling organisms called harmoniums. They are shaped like diamonds and thin as balloons. In contrast to the phosphorescent jonquil yellow of the stone itself, harmoniums glow aquamarine and, for reasons unknown, arrange themselves into beautiful patterns. They communicate telepathically with one another, but can only say, "Here I am, here I am, here I am," and "So glad you are, so glad you are, so glad you are." They feed only on mechanical energy. Harmoniums are nourished by music. After some time, these creatures are used by a certain character to help the protagonist escape the caves and fulfill his destiny. The method of doing so is arranging the harmoniums to spell out full sentences on the walls. The penultimate Your Sanctuary location in Earthbound, Lumine Hall, found in the caves below Deep Darkness, strongly resembles the Sirens of Titan's Mercury and its beautiful harmoniums. I clocked this resemblance immediately because I happened to have read The Sirens of Titan about 6 months before I first played Earthbound. It was an odd sensation to be ringingly reminded of a novel from the 50s by a game from the 90s while sitting at my computer in the 2020s. I really didn't know what to make of the comparison, if anything, and sort of chalked it up to coincidence. Lumine Hall, after all, does not serve the same purpose in the story, and there is no indication that its lights are living organisms. The colors are not quite jonquil yellow and aquamarine. However, one person other than myself who loves the Sirens of Titan is Shigesato Itoi, the creator of Earthbound. In general, with my Reconstructed videos, I aim for interpretations that stand without information about the real life of the artist. I strive to discover the meaning inherent to the text without relying on what the writer has publicly said or declines to say about the work, or even who they are. This is not the only or best way to do art interpretation. All styles of analysis have their strengths and limitations, but is the flavor I find most compelling. With that said, the more you learn about Shigesato Itoi, the harder he is to not talk about. Itoi is a bit of a minor celebrity in Japan for reasons ranging well beyond his creation of the Mother series. He rose to prominence as a copywriter, apparently penning some of the catchiest advertising campaigns of the 80s, and established a presence as the sort of TV personality who would be a guest judge on Iron Chef. His creative output has been prolific and eclectic, including professional collaborations with veritable titans of 20th century Japanese art like Haruki Murakami and Hayao Miyazaki. Itoi is the voice of the father in My Neighbor Totoro. Read any long-form writing about the creation of Earthbound and the mind-boggling anecdotes will keep flowing, and they do embellish one's understanding of the game. For example, Monotoli's original name being spelled with a Y is often referred to as a reference to the board game Monopoly, which felt silly to me since Monopoly is just a business-related word. But then I learned Shigesato Itoi loves the board game Monopoly, somehow. He plays it competitively and is quite good. Also, did you know the man digging for treasure in the desert is a direct parallel to Itoi's real-life, bombastic, televised search for hidden gold? Incredible. Like Gerardo Montague, he did not find what he was looking for. So I thought, let's follow this lead and return to the Sirens of Titan and see if it and Earthbound have deeper harmonies beyond momentary aesthetics. They do. The chapter in the Caves of Mercury does not have much in common with Lumine Hall rhetorically, but it does flow into the novel's strongest beliefs, and those beliefs are what I find echoed in the game. When the book's protagonist, at this point referred to as Unk, discovers how to escape the cave, he assumes the other person trapped with him, a man named Boaz, will come back to Earth as well. Boaz declines. He declines because of the harmoniums. He has been holding concerts for them, providing them richer and more varied and more potent music than the creatures could ever have otherwise eaten. Without him, the harmoniums will only have the slow, ancient rumblings of the planet itself, which the book does still refer to as a song. So, with hardly any hesitation, Boaz determines that, more than anything he could do on Earth, this role as music giver will make him more fulfilled, more useful, more loved. He stays behind. As I mentioned, the Sirens of Titan is largely about free will and, more specifically, our lack of it. Late in the story, Unk discovers his whole strange life, becoming the richest man in the world by sheer luck and then losing it all and being brainwashed by a Martian army, was predetermined to serve a specific purpose. An alien stranded on Titan needed a spare part to fix his spaceship. That was all. The other members of that alien species exerted an influence on humanity over tens of thousands of years to shape them to fulfill that one end. Stonehenge was a message in the aliens' geometric language that help was on the way. So was the Great Wall of China. Not just Unk's life, but all of human civilization was destined solely to deliver this spare part. The Bible was only ever a code telling Unk which stocks to buy. In essence, the Sirens of Titan asks, if our purpose is just to pass the butter, then what? Its answer is that it would be worth it. That what is gained in the process of being useful is so much greater than never being used at all. Great sacrifice in the service of utility is how love is created. In the novel, this strange idea comes with many caveats and elaborations and political allusions that I couldn't begin to get into now, but its core argument is that love and utility are the same sort of thing. If your pristine white dress stays unmuddied, you have not lived. Earthbound, I now see, believes similarly. It also features Stonehenge serving a secret purpose for an alien group. More crucially, it also features main characters who are made to sacrifice everything for a greater good without having any say in the matter. Earthbound says it's worth it. It is better to get stuck in the sand than to never become Dungeon Man. It is better to break your legs than languish in your golden castle, as long as you are useful to others. The whole adventure is worth it, even if you're no longer a child at the end. Shigesato Itoi has publicly noted Kurt Vonnegut as a major inspiration, and the influence is not hard to see. The Mr. Saturns in particular often conjure comparison to the Tralfamadorians of Slaughterhouse-5. The general Vonnegut vibe trickles throughout the Mother series, the wacky vocabulary, the mundane mixed with the indescribably strange, and the arrivals at earnest profundity. I would never claim certainty that Itoi was trying, intentionally or not, to replicate the message of the Sirens of Titan, but what is undeniably true is that I came to understand his game better, make it more whole in my mind, by reading a novel that he loved. For the record, I know I am not the first person to compare the Harmoniums to Lumine Hall. It's right there in Clyde Mandelin's excellent book on the game's localization. But I did manage to, by pretty unlikely circumstances, arrive at the connection on my own. And when I really pulled on that thread, something I don't usually do, I found more than what I was looking for. It makes me wonder what else I've missed. It makes me think, in awe, of how big art is. Forgive me, let's get back to the game. We have adventure left. Earthbound believes that everyone is a world unto themselves. Everyone has unique depths and contours only they could possibly traverse. Therefore, much of what needs to be done can only be done alone. In Magicant, there is beauty, kindness, sorrow, and hatred. That is true for me, and it is true for you. The necessary path underground is initially blocked, in a sense, by a village of little green guys called tendas. Nearly all of them are too shy to speak, therefore they will not move the boulder blocking the way until you cure their modesty. The solution is to borrow a book titled Overcoming Shyness from the Onet Library and deliver it all the way back to their cave, where a quick skim makes social butterflies of them all. The message of this section is to, support your local library? The tendas are a sort of forgettable and arguably an essential corner of Earthbound's writing, but yes, at the same time, fully represent the game's sincere strangeness and strange sincerity. That a cave of green creatures blocking your way is solved not with a baseball bat, but with literature is, in a word, sweet. The real point is almost proudly obvious, that to achieve depth you must connect with those who at first seem weird and different. And with that connection forged, Ness can now breach the surface, under which Earthbound suggests it is time to look inward as one can. This begins with a cup of tea. After taking a sip, the game presents the player with several minutes of nothing but scrolling text, reassuring music, and breathing visuals. The text addresses Ness directly. It urges him to reflect on how far he's come and the relationships he's formed. It reminds him of the difficult times, and assures him the struggle is worth it. It asks that Ness continue his courage and self-belief. Where is this voice coming from, and who is speaking? Someone older and kind. Beyond that, it's impossible to say. This is actually the second of these sage interludes, the first occurring back in Saturn Valley with a cup of coffee. They both end with, "I wish you luck." Their visual presentation separates them from the rest of the game, which functions to point the words outward at the player themselves. It is not just Ness being spoken to, but you. You too are being praised for your courage and perseverance. You too are being urged to self-reflect, to consider the meaning of this adventure. Furthermore, given the Coffee Break's dual audience, it is important to remember that Ness, or whatever it is you named him, isn't you. And now, within the planet itself, Earthbound is willing to show us more of who he is. In Lumine Hall, Ness's thoughts are written in lights on the wall. Before he realizes what is happening, his words wander and arrive at a question. What will happen to us? Vulnerability is expressed in this moment. Ness is not confident about the outcome of this journey. He is, to some extent, afraid. But still, he goes deeper. Further yet underneath is the Lost Underworld, an expansive cave with dinosaurs, geysers, and ego orbs, whatever those might be. It is an ancient place, one that emphasizes the smallness of the characters. This area ultimately has few secrets to share, but it does align for the upcoming sequence to be surrounded by a place stuck in an old, forgotten state. At the Lost Underworld's core is Fire Spring, the 8th and final Your Sanctuary location. Here, like Vonnegut's Mercury, the planet sings the completed melody, and Ness falls into a vision of himself as a baby. He awakens in the realm of Magicant. Magicant exists within Ness's mind and is populated by dreamlike imagery and memories. Characters from across Earthbound's adventure can be spoken to, each scrambling the mood of Magicant's colors. Importantly, there are also memories from Ness's life before the events of the game. A small bird says Ness has nearly forgotten it, but that he still hears its voice in the back of his head. A snowman reminisces about how fun a day it was before it melted. Here we can glimpse Ness's personal history, moments of his life that occurred outside of the player's sight or control, but are building blocks of his identity nonetheless, final proof that while you and Ness have similarities, he is not your embodiment. He has his own story with elements beyond your determination. These smiling flowers are entirely obtuse. We do not know why these are here, but we do know that Ness knows that they must represent something clear to him, but forever shrouded from us. Despite the initial bouncy and friendly atmosphere of Magicant, the memories that manifest here are not happy ones. They are melancholy. A long-gone pet bird, a melted snowman, these are things that brought joy and then ended. Ness remembers friends he hasn't played with in years. He encounters a younger version of himself from when he could still be carefree. Other than his mom and sister right at the start, the pre-established characters who exist here are not his close friends and allies, but people that conjure mixed to negative feelings. Ness remembers Everdread, the criminal who both fought and helped them, and then might have died. Past enemies speak of how badly he hurt them. Pokey says they'll be friends forever. The deeper you go, the more difficult the emotions become. You can find a tombstone for Buzz. Odd, abstract enemy encounters become common, Ness's own mind enacting violence against himself. These charismatic beings, called Flying Men, which claim to represent Ness's courage, can be recruited for help in combat, and when they get knocked out, they permanently die. A new grave appears for each one. Many questions one might have about Ness's emotions across the game are implicitly answered here. Was he sad when Buzz died? It would seem yes. Is the player supposed to feel bad for the zombies? Well, at least to some extent, Ness does. From all these little clues, we can piece together that Ness is mentally struggling with change and loss and consequence. His mind lingers on things that were one way but never can be that way again. He is upset that, whether necessary or not, along this journey people have gotten hurt. But still he goes deeper. The last friend Ness can speak to is himself from the start of his adventure. Ness gives himself a simple baseball cap. As an equipable item, it is statistically outclassed, so instead the cap functions as a totem of his identity, a reminder that after all this, he is still himself. That sort of confidence will be needed for the battle ahead. At the very core of Magicant is the Sea of Eden. Here, in this primordial place of crystals and serpents, Ness finds the Mani statue. Referred to as Ness's nightmare, it states that it is the evil part of Ness's mind and attacks. In combat, it uses PSI abilities unique to Ness like Flash and Rockin', illustrating that it too is indeed powered by Ness's mind. Ness's nightmare insists that it cannot be defeated. It is wrong. Upon victory, Ness hears his own voice saying he knows what he must do to defeat Giygas, and his power awakens. One by one, each of the sanctuaries grant him remarkable psychic expansion, accompanied by eye-popping stat buffs. Baseball cap back on his head, images of each sacred location flash rapidly behind him until Ness regains consciousness surrounded by his companions. The full Magicant sequence is about the salience and realness of one's internal battle. We all, it says, have a capacity for evil, and no matter how hard you hit in the physical plane, it is your ability to fight on the inside that determines your success. When the idol was shattered in Foreside, it was only half defeated. The idea of the statue, the impression and infection it left in Ness's mind, persisted. To eliminate such an idea requires diving deep, right past the things that scare you the most. It requires a courage that can only be gained by experiencing life with all its joys and its hardships, to embark on journeys through distant lands and encounter strange and wonderful people. Such journeys will undoubtedly incur change and loss and consequence. But the places and people and selves that are changed or lost remain within you as memories and are, rather than a hindrance, the very foundation of the courage you will need to defeat your own evil. According to Earthbound, that is what it means to grow up. Ness's Magicant will look very different from my own Magicant, which will look very different from yours. Yet the power to win those lonely battles can only come from unity with the Earth, with each other, from seeing with your own eyes how much there is beyond your mind. And still, that internal battle is not the final one. Victory serves to prepare your resolve for the bigger fight, the one we do face hand in hand. Giygas is now readying his ultimate onslaught on the planet, and the party is ready to fight him, but there is a catch. They can travel to where he is, but not when he is. According to Dr. Andonuts, he is attacking this location from many years in the past. In close collaboration with Applekid and the Mr. Saturns, the Doctor develops the Phase Distorter, a machine that can transport the party to any place and time. One more material is needed to finish construction, though, found by revisiting the meteorite in Onet, which is now overrun with strong enemies. This brief diversion nails down through gameplay the same sort of idea communicated by the flashback leading into Magicant, that no matter how far you go, your home will remain special. However, there is still a crucial downside to time travel, one which the Doctor hesitates to tell the group. He walks off to the edge of a cliff and stares outward. Dr. Andonuts is a bit of an elusive character to analyze. His inventions are frequently essential to the plot, but he himself stays mostly gruff and impersonal. And of course, a certain dark cloud hovers over him, that he abandoned his son. This moment of Andonuts stammering and then walking away is the most personality he ever expresses, the only time when his presentation of aloof man of science falters. I think, maybe, that it occurs because he's learned that his lifestyle of isolation from others was wrong. While his genius is useful to saving the world, he had to be alerted to the situation at all by Jeff, whom he seemingly never intended to see again. Completion of the Phase Distorter was possible only with assistance from colleagues, people he might never have met without being kidnapped by the Starmen, and the final ingredient had to be hand-delivered by Jeff and his friends. So the scientist may be realizing under the surface that his work is actually made stronger by connecting with other people, and so he hesitates to tell the party what needs to be done next. Living beings cannot survive the process of time travel. Just as he is understanding the value of humanity, he must ask these children to give up theirs. The workaround is that he can transplant their consciousness into robots. This way they can survive the trip to the past, but there is no guarantee their spirits will ever return to their bodies. It is a harrowing prospect. But just as Pooh had to give up his legs and eyes, all of Earthbound's heroes must make this ultimate commitment. It is their destiny, after all. One by one, Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh accept this and undergo a surgical process involving drills and flashing lights. They become robots. Usefulness is an act of love. In the cave of the past, things are gray and sharp. Its music aches. The only splash of color in this bleak environment is the red baseball cap Ness still wears on his head. The robot transformation element drives home the game's idea of courage and duty, that doing the right thing may require you to be irreparably changed. With the red hat, though, it promises that whatever change you endure, you're still you. It is unclear exactly how past the Cave of the Past is, nor is it clear exactly how time functions in this section at all, how Giygas could attack one age while existing in another. There is a sense of being unstuck in time, like Billy Pilgrim, as if events are now affecting each other regardless of strict chronology. What is clear is that in the present, this cave was coated with plant life, and in this eon, it is barren. That this setting surrounds Giygas illustrates the fate of the universe altogether should he succeed. Gray and sharp. There are, however, still butterflies. Inside a narrow crevice, the party finds themselves surrounded by flesh. A network of pulsing intestines make up the floor they clank upon. At the end of the entrails stands a mass that is at once machine, throne, and cervix. When they approach, its core shakes and morphs into the face of Ness, hat and all. And then none other than Pokey Minch materializes from above. He announces that the heroes are doomed to fail because the prophecy did not foresee his involvement. Giygas' power has grown so great that it has overtaken his own mind that he needs the assistance of someone like Pokey to help channel it, and Pokey is more than willing. Thus, Earthbound's final battle commences. It begins somewhat conventionally. Both Giygas and Pokey in his strange spider mech are valid targets, and they both take turns using typical attacks. Giygas' go-to is PSI Rockin', typically signature to Ness, the mimicry extending beyond a face to indicate some deeper similarity. However, due to a combination of shields, Giygas is invulnerable for the time being, and only Pokey continues to take damage. After enough hits, Pokey gives a frustrated speech and does something that shatters any semblance of a typical boss fight. The entire contraption housing Giygas here is known as the Devil's Machine, and is necessary for containing the being's extraordinary strength. Pokey now turns the Devil's Machine off. Here I need to give another verbal warning for flashing lights. The visuals for the final phases of the Giygas encounter are particularly intense. Unleashed from the machine, Giygas appears as crimson smoke swirling around a tortured, distorted face. Pokey states that Giygas is no longer capable of thinking rationally, his mind overwhelmed by his own power, and all he knows now is to consume and destroy. In this form, Giygas' attacks are ineffable but lethal nonetheless. His shields are gone, but it's hard to imagine your meager attacks are making a dent when it's hard to even tell what you're looking at. Before each assault, Giygas briefly speaks. Among his spoken phrases are, sometimes he just screams. Whatever else this entity did before, whatever plans he may have had, what Giygas is doing now is suffering. Despite his indescribable form and overflowing force, one emotion conjured here is pity. Somehow, some way, Giygas is human too. All throughout the adventure, the antagonist felt so alien and distant, so vague in motivation and personality, that he seemed entirely beyond humanity. But here we are, at the end, and we discover that Giygas is simultaneously impossible to fully comprehend and experiencing piercingly recognizable emotions. The reproductive imagery associated with Giygas further ties him to us. In addition to the yonic cave entrance and blatant cervix, in one of the backgrounds Giygas forms, infamously and perhaps accidentally but unseeably, the shape of a fetus in negative space. The impression thus created is that what is happening here is some form of birth. Indeed, I think Earthbound is saying that the experience depicted in this battle, all of it, is something we all share with each other from the very beginning. This state of being, scrambled and unmoored and crimson yellow and feeling at once jubilation and terror, is the fabric from which we are all cut and are always capable of returning to. But we don't have to. The fear can be overcome and we can maintain shape. The solution to victory over Giygas is not continued physical attacks, but prayer. In the final phase, the player must repeatedly select Paula's pray option. Each time, her telepathic plea for help reaches a group of friends from a different part of their adventure, who send prayers in return, all of which inch Giygas closer to defeat. The entity grows increasingly contorted. Paula keeps praying, and she is not praying to some almighty god, but to humanity in general. Despite the gulfs of time and distance, humanity replies. It is togetherness and unity that provide the deepest strength. Earthbound believes in us. But it isn't quite enough. They need help from one more source. Paula prays harder than ever and reaches one final being, the player. She reaches you. Earthbound knows your name and confidently states that you keep praying. If you do clasp your hands together as Paula begged and pray, it does feel that you are reaching through the very screen, dealing stronger and stronger blows until, eventually, it is enough. Giygas collapses into nothing more than a sheet of noise and then blinks out of existence. The universe is saved. After a brief image of home, we see the robots broken. But one by one, the spirits of the heroes float out and return to their bodies in present-day Saturn Valley. Pooh goes back to his country with a farewell. Jeff says he's going to stick around to study with his father, who at least doesn't reject the idea. Paula asks Ness to walk her home. The pair can take as much time as they like exploring the suddenly peaceful world. Ness can even ride his bike. After all their suffering and sacrifice, our heroes are rewarded with a simple and easy life. Eventually, Paula will return to Tucson, and Ness will wander all the way back home, where talking with his mother rolls the credits. And yet this victory, while real and meaningful, is not permanent. After the credits, Ness receives a letter from Pokey taunting him, and the following "the end" includes a question mark. The universe was saved, but Pokey wasn't. He chose not to be. While Earthbound's conclusion prominently expresses optimism and love for humanity, Pokey's character provides a dark lining. When defeated by radical optimism, Pokey does not even consider the redemption that would be easily available to him. He simply runs away again to concoct a new plan in another time and place. Why? Unlike the minor antagonists, Pokey was not under a spell. This child chose to unleash apocalyptic cataclysm of his own volition. He doesn't even seem to think this action will spare him. During the battle, he admits he is absolutely terrified of what is happening, yet there's not even a glimmer of regret. Why is he doing any of this? Pokey's defining trait is cowardice. At all costs, he avoids getting hurt or doing anything he doesn't want to. Naturally, the way to prevent people from telling you what to do, or being able to hurt you, is to have power over them. So Pokey chases the nearest power he can find, and that impulse brings him all the way to utter destruction. It is not that he is devoid of emotion. In fact, he feels many emotions quite strongly: greed, jealousy, pride, contempt. He expresses kindness toward his mate in Foreside, and I think he still wants to be Ness's friend, but he is devoid of courage. He always chooses fear, and that path leads only further from humanity. It will turn your skin blue and sickly, and, what's worse, will freeze you in place, never able to grow past a child. That fate, the game says, is, while painless, worse than death. So Earthbound believes in us, in the goodness of humanity, but it also believes in an inherent evil within us. Some people will always choose fear and will never be swayed by courage. While love can always defeat it, our fear will always return. Did it raise an eyebrow, by the way, when I mentioned the player being asked by name to pray for victory and then didn't stop to talk about what that meant? I am, to be frank, intimidated by this moment. I feel lacking in the tools necessary to interpret it with any degree of confidence. For our cooldown stretch today, I'm going to try anyway to provide some kind of answer, but couched within a broader discussion of what these videos are trying to do in general, what limitations they have, and what value they still bring. Episodes of Reconstructed are not academic works. Don't worry, I do think they're good enough to bring fresh ideas to analysis of these stories, and I'm vain enough to admit it. And it's not like I don't do research. I spend dozens of hours on the research phase of every video. Dozens, definitely not hundreds. That research is specifically incomprehensive. Between my replay of the game and finishing the first draft of the script, I intentionally avoid anyone else's interpretation of the story. I prefer to start from square one, or as close as I can get, and discover my own answer to the work's meaning. I will seek out other interpretations while revising my script, but only after my personal ideas are locked in to a certain degree. Mostly I'm scanning for major errors I may have made while they can still be fixed. This seems to be fairly common practice for YouTube video essays, especially in nebulous fear of accidental plagiarism, but obviously this isn't how scholarship works. In real academic study, you only reach new knowledge by understanding the full body of work that came before you. But Sky, you might say, you do write YouTube video essays, not academic papers, so what's the problem? You have a knack for this style, your interpretations are compelling to people and provide deeper connection to and understanding of the art. Aw, I might say, thank you, you flatter me. It just isn't always adequate. There's always some kind of failure. This metafictional twist at the end of Earthbound, something key to the game's identity and legacy, feels outside my grasp. Trying to translate it into an argument feels like trying to palm a basketball, something I still can't do, and so I guess at this point I never will. My best go is as follows. By bringing attention to the artificiality of the game, Earthbound positions the very act of playing the game as equivalent to the courage expressed by its characters. The thing that will truly curse Ness's world to eternal darkness is if you turn off the TV and walk away. But the game trusts that you won't, trusts that in this moment you will actually devote energy to believing on some level that your clasped hands are defeating Giygas. Earthbound believes in you. So then, in a story about growing up and how that changes you, it insists here that one thing you must always continue to do is play. To stop playing is tantamount to cowardice. How about that? What do we think? I'm not totally convinced. Clearly I've been going through a bit of a crisis of faith regarding my work, and it's one of several reasons this video has taken me forever and a day to finish, but don't let me bore you further. I'm still here, and I will keep honing this craft, and maybe someday I'll palm all the basketballs that bounce my way. These videos are work, but also play. It would be cowardly of me to stop making them. Despite some angsty rumination, I do believe that this style of essay is valuable. People are so unique and storytelling so complex an endeavor that any one person really digging hard into presenting the full mosaic of what a story means to them, even with some tiles inevitably absent or badly chipped, will say something new. Every little decision one makes regarding angle, lens, and context cascades into the creation of an interpretation that nobody else has ever quite had, each paragraph a single snapshot of the artwork and yourself. At the end, you will start glowing jonquil yellow and aquamarine, one single harmonium eating music on the cave walls. No more, but no less. And if we all just keep talking and layering and loving art, one distant day the full pattern will come into being. Here I am, so glad you are. Basically I'm saying that you, viewer, should make an Earthbound video all your own. Look at the camera. Ready, say fuzzy pickles. Hello, thank you so much for watching to the end. I'm sorry it's been 14 months since my last video, but wow, it feels nice to be back. Finishing this video while working full-time without compromising my vision for the project has been one of the greatest challenges of my life. But here we are. I did it. Of course, thank you so much to all my patrons, most of which surprisingly stuck with me through this accidental hiatus, with a special thanks to Cass R and Fidel Ubad. If you enjoyed my work, please do like, subscribe, and maybe press the hype button if you have it. Let's see if that does anything. Also, sharing it around on Blue Sky, Reddit, Discord, etc. always helps a ton. In a few different ways, 2025 didn't really go my way, but that's true of a lot of people, and all things considered, I am not in too bad a place. I will keep making videos, even if they take some patience. Stay safe out there. I've been Skyhoppers, and I'll see you in the next one.